Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of the Kevin Moore Show. Now, on today's show, I interview Tom Campbell live on location in Manchester. He's a physicist. He takes part in my documentary, They Call Us Channelers. I was totally blown away with the information he gave on this interview. I decided to release the whole interview here and now. So enjoy my interview with Tom Campbell. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, you're very welcome. It's interesting that we should meet here in Manchester in the snowstorm.
We've met on one of the worst days possible, weather-wise.
It's the worst weather in decades. I understand.
Absolutely, it is. It is, and but it's just an honour to have you here as well. And one of my first physicists that I've actually interviewed in person as well.
Yeah, we did do an interview a year ago, maybe?
Yes, we did. Just remind us then, what is your background as a physicist? Where did you first sort of work?
Okay. I went through the usual educational process, to become a physicist, and you get the bachelor's degree and then a master's degree, and then I go to work on the PhD. And I worked the PhD and did my thesis, got good results, and got to a point where I had to go do something else. And I didn't know exactly what it was at the time. I had this sense that I needed to, something was about to happen, something important was going on, and I needed to be elsewhere. Being in graduate school was not the right place. And I struggled with that for a while because I was like 98% done to the PhD. My major professor wanted me to do another research project because it was a low energy nuclear physics and big machines, big equipment, and once you get a graduate student trained, it takes them a year or two to figure out how to do all the work. But then once they're trained, they can grind out another research paper rather efficiently. So most of the graduate students would do multiple theses, if you like, just because they could pop them out and get published credits to their name and so on. Of course, the major professor, he gets all the published credits to his name as well. So I was right about in that phase, and I knew I had to leave. And I was burned out on it anyway, but I was so close. But I did, and I left within 3 months. The connection to Bob Monroe turned up, which I would not have caught, any other way. And the rest is history. My life changed after that. So I have been what I would call a applied physicist. That means I worked in the quote real world as opposed to the academic world. So instead of just doing things because they were interesting to do or doing research, as an applied physicist, you solve real problems that people need solved, things that they don't understand, they want to understand, do analysis that needs to be done. So it's applied physics. So I was out of academia in this first job, which is where the connection to Bob Monroe came from. And I had, like I said, only been working there for a few months, fresh out of graduate school. And I met Bob, and we started working together for the next decade. So my physics career and my career in studying consciousness both started at about the same time, one only about 3 or 4 months behind the other. And I continued to work in physics. I started in technical intelligence. I then went to missile defense, simulations. I worked for lots of different contractors. I was always in the contractor world. Well, my first job that I went to was a government job, but then I was a contractor, and I worked for NASA. It was one of the last big institutions I worked for. But so when I say I worked for NASA, I didn't really work for NASA. I was a contractor to NASA. NASA didn't cut my paycheck, but I worked on NASA's work, NASA's job. So I worked on NASA projects. And that was fun. I was doing that as a consultant. The last half of my career, I just became a consultant. There's a lot better way to do the work because you get to pick all the fun jobs. You know, you get jobs that nobody else can do. That's why they need a consultant. If they could do them themselves, they would do them in-house, but they can't. They don't have the expertise or whatever. So those are the most interesting jobs because they're challenging and have more depth to them, and it's not just turning a crank. So you would get these very interesting jobs. You work at the job and stay out of the politics. You don't have to go to staff meetings. You know, you're not really part of their machine, and you just do the technical work, and in 6 months or a year or 2 years, however long it takes, you produce a product and then you're done. So then you go do another interesting job. So that was so much better than actually, you know, collecting a paycheck all the time, and it paid about twice as good on top of that. So I did that for the last half of my career, and when I was at NASA, I was there as a consultant, basically doing work that they couldn't do in-house.
Okay. So when your time at your last job at NASA as a contractor, you must have been working for many years on My Big Toe.
Yes. Well, like I say, my career in both the consciousness world and the physics world all started about the same time, which was about 1972. So, and I'm still working. You see, so it's been since 1972, so you can count those years up. And all of this time I was dual careered. I would be doing physics by day and consciousness by night.
Now, your peers or your colleagues that were very much into the science, being a physicist, did they know what you were up to?
Well, one of them worked with me, and that was Dennis Menerick. We both worked at the same place, and we both went out to Bob Monroe's at the same time, and we met him at the same time. So one was a Confederate of mine, and the rest, you know, we didn't really talk about it that much. My boss was very interested in it, and he got involved a little bit with it as well. So that's handy when your boss is supportive of your extracurricular activities as well. But mostly in my career as a physicist, I kept that separate from my career in consciousness. The two don't really mix that well.
What really got you into consciousness? I mean, I know you've mentioned Bob Monroe. We're going to get into Bob as well. But I mean, what was that defining moment you was like, there's more to this reality than just the science?
Well, that first came when I was a graduate student. Probably about 2/3 of my way through the PhD work. And I saw an advertisement for transcendental meditation. And the thing that caught my attention was you can get by with less sleep. When you're a graduate student, you need more than 12 hours a day to work. There's a lot to do. So I took the transcendental meditation, and it fit like a glove. I had no problems at all. I was gone, the first time I sat down to practice. So after about 3 months of that transcendental meditation practice, which is twice a day, about 20 minutes each time is what they recommend, and I did that pretty carefully. I found just by trying something, kind of a wild idea, of debugging my computer code while in an altered state of consciousness. And those were the bad old days when computer code was written in punch cards. And I'd have 4 boxes of punch cards with maybe 1,000 punch cards in each box. And it was very hard to find errors in those days. It wasn't the rerun it, push the button and tell it to run again, and the error checking code will tell you where the problem was. It wasn't like that at all. Every error was a problem that took a long time to find. A run on the computer might take you a week. You'd turn in a job, and a week later you'd get one back, and that was it. That was all you got accomplished for that week, was to see where that program bombed out. So you can see it took a long time. This was one computer for the entire university. And that computer was probably about 100th as powerful as probably the computer in your phone, you know. So this was a long time ago in computing, in the early 70s and late 60s. So I was very familiar with every line of code, and I had pored over it. And you not only had coding errors, but you had card punch errors. If that hole in the punch card was just a slight bit off, it would create an error. So if your punch was a physical punch that knocked holes in cards, was misaligned slightly, that could create errors. If the card wasn't quite positioned in the deck right, you know, it was a little lopsided or a little crooked when it went in, or if two cards got interchanged with each other, all of these were errors. So you see, the source of error wasn't just code. So this was in those days, it was a monstrous deal trying to take very complex code and get it to actually work, because there was so many ways that it would not work, so many things that could go wrong. Sometimes the guys at the computer, as they were feeding in these 4 boxes of cards, they could only get a handful at a time, and they'd get them mixed up. So one handful would get put behind rather than in front of the next handful, and you wouldn't find that out until it bombed the next time. Well, there goes another week in your working process, you see. That's why we needed to not sleep. We had a lot of work trying to get the computers to run. So debugging was a really long, tedious process that would take months and months. And I sat down in a meditation state one day, in a transcendental meditation, brought up my code like a printout, and just scrolled through it. And in my mind, I said, wherever there's an error, whenever I see a line with an error, I want that line to be red. The other lines were black on white, like the actual printout. And surprise of surprises, I saw a red line. So I looked at it, and I knew what it was because I had written every line, so I was very familiar with it. And I said, well, that's interesting. I'll go check that out. And I saw a few more red lines and a few more red lines. And I found that every one of them was an error. So I could go to that line, find the error in the line. It could have just been a card punch hole. It could be a comma that wasn't in the right place, something like that. And I was able to debug my code like 100 times faster. And pretty soon, people were bringing me their code. Tom, can you help me decode this code? Because I was getting mine done impossibly efficiently and quickly. So that was when it hit me, which was one of the big aha moments in my life, was there's something else bigger in this reality than just what I understand. I'm a physicist, so the physical world is my machine. That's what I study, that's what I emulate and model. But this was not part of the physical world. This was something else outside the physical. So that was a big moment where my reality went from what's called an operational definition of reality, and that is, if you can't measure it, it's not significant. You have to do an operation on it. If you can't do an operation, measuring is just an operation. If you can't work with it, measure it, it is either doesn't exist, or if it does, it's not significant. So that's the way science tends to look at things, in a materialist-based reality. And I couldn't keep that. I couldn't say that was the only way the world worked once I was able to debug computer code in my mind. Yeah. Well, from that time, then I started saying, well, what else is in this reality that I don't know about? And I'm a physicist. I model reality. That's what physics does. And now I find out that there's a whole nother part of reality that I didn't even know existed. So I was very curious about that. What was it? How did it work? I started doing other things with my intent while in meditation states. And it wasn't too long after, like I said, it was about 2/3 through my career there. And so it wasn't but maybe another year that I left the university without getting my PhD, but just before I was done, and going to work where my boss bumped into Bob Monroe, and I got to meet Bob, and I started studying consciousness because I was real keyed up on how does this work? What's going on here? What else is in our reality that is not physical and does not need an operational definition? Because I couldn't measure any of it. It was all non-physical. So that was what my interest was and my passion was then. So that's why I was very anxious to work with Bob to study consciousness.
And just remind us, who was Bob as well?
Bob Monroe, he's deceased now, but he wrote 3 books. First was Journeys Out of Body, then it was Far Journeys, and then Ultimate Journey. He was a gentleman, owned Jefferson Cable Company in Charlottesville, Virginia, and he was wealthy, and he just happened to have spontaneous out-of-bodies, and it scared him to death. He went to see a psychiatrist to see whether he was insane. He tried to not have them, tried to suppress them. He had them anyway. So he said, well, let's just work with them and see what's going on here. He did. Then he wrote these books. And his books were very matter-of-fact. He wasn't an engineer, but he thought like an engineer. He had that very logical, straightforward kind of mind. And his books are almost like a notebook, a diary of his experiences. So he didn't try to judge them. He didn't try to explain them. He didn't give you any theory. He just said, this is what happened to me, and here's how I tested it and convinced myself that it was real. So that's who Bob Monroe was. And he's one of the leaders in the kind of study of mind. He was doing this in the late 60s. Wrote the book, I think, in probably late 60s, very early 70s when the first book came out. And he wanted to understand it. He wanted it to be science because he didn't want to be the crazy old guy who, had odd experiences. He didn't like that role. He wanted to be the role of the guy who figured things out, and was doing something that was solid. So he was looking for a couple of scientists to join him with his lab in order to help put this on the scientific map. And he would have liked to have had some credentialed older scientist with big reputations, but he didn't. All he got was a couple of kids just out of graduate school, myself and another guy that worked with me, Dennis Menerick. So he settled for that, and we spent the next decade, like I say, working together, studying consciousness. And when Dennis and I started to work for Bob, we went into it with the idea of, we don't know what this is going to be like. Is this guy for real? Is he not? Is he insane? Is he not? We didn't know, and we're both technical people, but we wanted to find out. So we figured, let's just go see. If it turns out to be bogus, we'll leave. If it doesn't, it's a lifetime opportunity to learn something amazing. So we got into it, and we told Bob that we don't want to study you as kind of an anomaly. We want to have the experiences ourselves, because if we don't experience it ourselves, it's not real to us. It's just something that it's intellectual, not knowing. So he agreed, and he spent at least half the time that we were out there in his lab building equipment, setting it up, because there was nothing in this lab. It was just an empty shell of a building. So as we did that half the time, and he came up then and started to teach us techniques and going out of body. So it was a kind of a 50-50 deal. And we did that for some years. And Bob was a good teacher. He never led us into anything. He always led from behind, if you will. Didn't want to lead the witness. He had other people that also came there and he was working with, and he kind of kept us separate because he didn't want us to influence each other. To where we all started having similar experiences because we were trading experiences. So Dennis and I always worked together, but we were kept separate. So Bob was pretty careful. He really wanted it to be science and wanted it to be real. So he was a good teacher, and in probably a year and a half, both Dennis and I were able to go out of body. This is a metaphor now, go out of body. I say that It doesn't mean that something goes out of your body. That's not how it works. But that's just the metaphor that people use. So we were able to explore in this non-physical realm that I now call the larger consciousness system whenever we wanted to. It was kind of on demand. It was an easy thing to do after a while. But we spent a lot of time getting there.
And no kind of rituals involved with that, in a sense?
No, the only thing we did that you might call that is we used binaural beats. And the binaural beats is something that Dennis actually came up with. He read about it, an article by Oster in a 1969, I think, Scientific American. They had an article about binaural beats, and in that article they said that they seem to have the property to entrain brainwaves, entrain the EEG signal. So you could put more energy, say, in a theta state, which is where we were working. Bob Monroe had this pulsation that happened to him at about 4 hertz. So we wanted to encourage that 4 hertz theta state. It just was something to try. Dennis and I were trying everything. Anything that we could think of, we were trying it, because we didn't have, and nobody else had any idea how to measure, how to control any of this. So Dennis and I put together binaural beats. We listened to them, and they were really good. They were powerful in the way that they could entrain, your EEG, put you in a state and keep you there. So actually, Bob was out at Esalen at the time giving a course, and when he came back, we presented him with the binaural beats and so on. Then we started bringing naive subjects into the lab, putting them in the booth, giving them the binaural beats, see if it was something special about us or whether anybody would have the same reaction. And word got around, and then pretty soon there were people knocking on the door, wanted to be part of this experimentation. And then Bob started to give like a seminar for these interested people, and Dennis and I would run the seminar, and Bob would come in and talk to them and that sort of thing. So it just kind of developed all on its own. Wow. Eventually, Dennis and I kind of slipped out the back because it became more of a trainer role than a research role. And I continued my research because my research was all done in the non-physical. Now, I could do physics in the non-physical, because to do physics, you have to be able to repeat exactly states of consciousness and experiences. And I had the ability to do that. So I could go to the exact same state in the exact same way and change a variable and see how that changed the result. So by doing that, I began to understand a lot of the facts, if you will, given that they are not objective facts, they're subjective facts. Facts just the same of consciousness. How did consciousness work? What could it do? And I tried to figure out, why did it work that way? What else could it do? What were the limits? What couldn't you do with it? What could you do with it? So the next 30 years, I'm trying to fill out that map of consciousness, trying to do research there, trying to figure out how it works. I eventually thought I had a pretty good handle on it. I wrote the trilogy, and I wrote it as a theory of consciousness. It was all about consciousness at that point. About 2 years after I published that trilogy, I had an aha moment that I saw that the same ideas, the same concepts that I had in my theory of consciousness also did better physics. I went back and looked at my quantum mechanics and my relativity and said, wow, these same ideas explain the things that nobody understands about those sciences. See, both of those were mysterious sciences in the sense that nobody had a clue why quantum mechanics worked the way it did. It was just called weird science. And nobody knew why the speed of light should be a constant. No other thing that moved at a constant speed like that. So it just was an anomaly, and there was no real good reason why it should be a constant. But it was, and we know that if we assumed that it was a constant, then we could solve all kinds of nice physics problems. That became the theory of relativity, basically based on light being a constant. With my understanding of consciousness, I knew exactly why light was a constant. The speed of light was a constant. And I understood exactly what quantum mechanics was doing, like in the double slit experiments. They all made good sense. So instead of weird science, it was logical science, just like every other science, once you could see it from the right perspective. So then I started developing the scientific part of the theory. And I found that all of the outstanding, what do you call them, paradoxes, where scientists get to a point like the double slit and they scratch their head and say, I have no idea, why that's like that. But they go on and they measure it and they can work with it. They just don't understand why it's like that. And there were dozens of these paradoxes, and they're still paradoxes. But I went through all of them and found that my understanding of consciousness, which led me to an understanding of this being an information-based reality or virtual reality, could explain all of them logically with no strange assumptions and no weird science.
Okay, and just very briefly then, what are some of those understandings in a sense? I mean, how does having the understanding of that consciousness plays a part in some of those?
Well, as I studied consciousness in my own consciousness, as well as the years I put in at the lab studying, other consciousness as well, I realized that consciousness is information. It's just information. And that's not hard to understand, because if you look at your own consciousness, what are you conscious of? What creates your awareness? Well, for you now, it would be your senses. Right? So you've got 5 senses. So you hear things, you see things, you smell things, you can feel things, and that's what creates your reality. It's all information. It's data. It's not only data, but it's digital data. It's discrete data. So what I mean by digital, it comes in chunks. So a photon, which is a chunk, goes into, bounces off of something, goes into your eye, gets focused by a lens, it hits a retina, and when it does that, a little electrical pulse travels down that nerve. You see, all of this is discrete pieces of energy. It's discrete, it's information. Now you take all those little electrical pulses, which then kind of rearrange neurons, do other things in the brain, and you interpret these little electrical pulses, these patterns of neurons, as this reality. And that's true of all 5 of your senses. So it's digital information that you take in, you process, and here's the reality. That's the result. That's the end product of the processing, the digital information. Take all your senses away, and what are you? If you couldn't hear, see, feel, anything, what would you be?
Awareness?
That's it. You would be a point of awareness floating in a black void. You kind of have the Descartes moment. I think, therefore I am. You would just exist, nothing else. You wouldn't have any reality, basically. Your only reality would be your own awareness. So that's kind of the starting point then with consciousness. You see, it's an awareness. But then reality, which is what we sense here in this quote-unquote physical reality, that's just information. Information can be computed. Information can be stored. Information can be passed around. That's just the nature of information. So I came to the realization, studying consciousness, that consciousness was an information system. Well, if it's an information system, it's computable. That led me to the idea of a virtual reality. We live in a reality that is computable. And once you understand that, a whole lot of things change about the way you see the nature of reality. You have to let go of materialism, you let go of determinism, and you now have a computed reality, a simulation, if you will, of a reality. Now, a simulation can't be conscious. A simulation is ones and zeros. If it's a dynamic simulation, those ones and zeros are changing all the time, but it's still just ones and zeros, in a memory slot. That's it. And if you store it, then it's ones and zeros on a hard drive. Ones and zeros on hard drives aren't conscious. So then you come to the conclusion that consciousness must be outside of the virtual reality. It's not part of the simulation. It has to be exterior to the simulation. And after thinking about that, it made good sense, because if you have a simulation, the thing that runs the simulation, the thing that is creating the simulation, can't be inside the simulation. In other words, it can't be simulated. The thing that's running the simulation has to be at a higher level of existence, let's say, than the simulation. Its simulation is a product, and the movie projector can't be inside the movie. It's got to be outside the movie. So that then just verifies this idea that consciousness is what we are, that our physical reality is a simulation. That's all the sense data we get here. That consciousness then is non-physical. Consciousness is not a creation of the brain. Consciousness is something else. The brain is a virtual brain. Virtual realities only produce information for a player for some reason. A virtual reality doesn't just start up and start, making a virtual reality, simulating a virtual reality just for the fun of it. It has to have a reason. It evolves. It becomes what it is, because what it is what works, what's needed. That's how evolution works. So you can see all these ideas kind of changes your concept about what is and why it is. Purpose comes out of it. And suddenly the non-physical to us, from our perspective as people in this physical universe, from our perspective it's non-physical. From, the non-physical becomes the superset, the source, and the physical is a subset, a product of the source.
But if I'm a product of the source, I'm aware of my awareness in this present moment. Mm-hmm. And if that is part of consciousness, how could that part of consciousness be in the virtual reality?
It's not. You see, look at any virtual reality game. Okay, so you play a virtual reality game, and in that virtual reality game, you play a character. You log on, you build up that character, and that's your character. You are that character's consciousness. You see, that elf or barbarian or witch or whatever your character is not conscious. It's just a simulation. It's ones and zeros on a hard drive. It's just computed. And it's only computed in as much as it sends you a data stream that shows you what's on the screen.
Well, if this isn't simulation, my God, consciousness awareness must be so ultimate, must be so unbelievable, because this awareness of consciousness right now that I am is pretty incredible to me. And if this is simulated, if I'm simulated by that greater part of me, that's the full part, I couldn't even imagine what that reality is like.
Yes, you see, so it's a very big change in the way you see the world. So we have the basic concept is that this is a virtual reality. And I got that from studying consciousness and realizing that everything was information. So some of the research I did, people say, well, what kind of research did you do in the non-physical? Well, one of the things I did is early on, it was only maybe 3 years or so into working with Bob, I began to see auras. I began to see energy patterns around things, around all sorts of things, around power lines, around clocks, around computers, around people. And
what switched that on for you?
It just happened. One day I'm walking down this little brick walkway with stores on either side. It was kind of like an outdoor mall area. It was the downtown Charlottesville, and then they cut off traffic and bricked the road, so it was a walkway. I was walking down there and I looked and I saw a bunch of trees out in the distance, and they had all this gold glowy stuff all over them. And I said, what is that? So, close your eyes, shake your head, open your eyes again. It's still there. Close your eyes again, wait a little longer, open them again. It's still there. Excuse me, sir. Did you see those trees? Is there anything different about them? No, didn't see a thing. But I did. So I stopped people to see if they saw it, in case it was something, somebody with powerful lights on the other side or something, but nobody else saw it. And then I realized that it was connected to with me being in a very mellow consciousness state, which I was just kind of walking aimlessly that time. And that based on my state of consciousness, I could bring that up or I could turn it off. And then I started to play with it. What was it? Why was it? What didn't have it? What did? Could I change it? What did it mean? So I have all these questions. I'm a scientist. That's what I do, is try to understand things like that. So I played with it, and I started to then see auras around people. And I could tell that if the person was excited or angry, it was different. It had some kind of key to their emotional state. I could see it had some kind of key to their intellectual state. And at that time, I thought these things actually belonged to the body. They were something generated by the body, and you could just see the body. And then I realized that no, you could see an aura in a photograph. And then I realized that you didn't need a photograph. You could just see an aura with an intent to see an aura. And none of the, the photograph, the connection to the body, none of that was necessary. Well, that's another fact that says it's information. It's just about information. It's not about the body. It's not about the fact that, that power line, has, with the power in it. What was it? So information kept coming back out of this. And I had a friend, Dennis, this friend of mine I told you about, after I was telling him that I was seeing these things, he picked a photograph, and he brought a photograph up to me, and there was like 5 people in the photograph. And he said, one of these guys in the photograph is a psychic. Do you know which one it was? Well, I looked at their auras, and one of them had this big, aura that was complex, and the others not so much. So I said that one, and that was the right answer. So that's when I realized that it didn't have to be a body. Later, I realized it didn't have to be a photograph either, because it was just information.
So you could see that in person as well.
Yeah.
So is that gift still with you?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never gone away. It's just it's a state of consciousness, and has nothing to do with a physical body. You see, you are a consciousness, and just like you log on and play the elf, you now, as a consciousness, are logging on, playing your avatar, which is your body.
Have you been able to speak to the greater part of you that's playing you right now?
Well, that greater part of me is actually all of me. That's consciousness. That is who I am. I'm consciousness. I'm not a body. So yes, I interact with consciousness. There are lots of things you can interact with. Everything on this, everything that is conscious is being played in this virtual reality, is being played by what I call an IUOC, an individuated unit of consciousness. And you can communicate, you can share information, and you can do this just like you can see auras. You put yourself in the appropriate mental space, and all of it becomes available.
Meditation?
Meditation.
Will that get you there?
Yes, that will get you there, but it's not the only thing that it takes to get you there. The problem is, think of it this way: if think of a blind person, grew up in Appalachia in the hills someplace, had never left his house. Somebody scoops him up in a bag, flies him to New York City, and drops him in the middle of Times Square. All right, now he has to make sense of his world, but there's nothing familiar anywhere in it. So what does he do? He reaches around like this, right? And he finds, oh, that's a lamppost. Well, he takes 2 steps away and he goes back to it. And then he steps the other way and, oh, that's a garbage can, or it's a street or a curb, and he hears this traffic and he doesn't know what that is. So you just have to experiment. You have to take a few steps and explore and come back to what you know. and explore a little more. And years go by and you begin to build a map of the world and how it works, what it means, because you interact with it, and what does it do. You know, you walk out in traffic and you hear tires screeching, people trying to stop, not to run you over. People holler at you or come up and grab you, and move you someplace. And these things repeat. And pretty soon you learn to figure it out. So 10 years later, this blind guy is, running a newsstand, and he's making a good living, and he's figured it out. Well, that's the way it is. So just meditation isn't enough, because you find yourself as a stranger in a strange land, right? And it's hard to make sense out of it and understand it and figure out what it means unless you can explore it methodically and consistently. So most people who end up going out of body, it's a spontaneous thing. It just happens. It's not something they control. It's not something they do on purpose. It's not something they can recreate. It just happens when it happens and doesn't when it doesn't. And you can't really learn the lay of the land. It's hard to build a map in those conditions.
You mentioned individuated units of consciousness. Mm-hmm. Is that the same as connecting to the higher self, as some people would term it the higher self?
Some people would call that a higher self. Yes, they could call that a higher self. And there's really three categories of information out there. One of them is the system itself, what I call the larger consciousness system. And that's just kind of the daddy system, the source system of which we're a piece. Then there are IUOCs, individuated units of consciousness, like we are, okay, and we're logged on to these bodies. And when you log on in a totally immersive way, you begin to identify yourself as your avatar. In other words, if you play an elf, well, you can always get up, go make a sandwich, put your elf on hold, you come back. You don't identify but so much with your elf, because you're still different than your elf. But if you are immersed in that game with that elf 100%, you don't take a break to eat or to go to the bathroom or anything. You are only experiencing what your character experiences. You see, what your avatar experiences. That is the sum total and complete whole of your experience. You begin to believe that you are that elf. Well, you see, that's the way we are. We are immersed. It's an immersive game. We've logged on. So I am a consciousness. I've logged on this body. And I feel like that this body is really me because it's an immersive thing. So you identify with it, but that you're not the body. You're the consciousness.
It's almost like a funnel, isn't it? You're funneled through where the greater part of you is at the top of the funnel, and you're then brought down to this much lower level version of what you truly are.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that works is that you have this individuated unit of consciousness, and it is your higher self, is another way of saying it. It's kind of your main subset of consciousness. That's you as consciousness. And the way it works is that it takes a piece of itself. Remember, this is information. Think information system. So it partitions off a piece of itself, and that piece of itself, it logs in to this virtual reality game, as Tom Campbell say, or Joe Smith. It logs in, and it then has to learn how to interpret the data stream it gets. See, when you're playing an elf, you're getting a data stream from a computer, and that data stream tells you what that elf can do. And the data stream has rules. Your elf can't fly. Your elf can't run but so fast. Your elf can be hurt and killed. It has all these rules that then you have to abide by. You see, so you are now playing an avatar, and the avatar has rules. The whole point of the game is that you make choices. You make choices. So you, playing an elf, make all the elf's choices for him. You decide whether to fight or whether to run, or whether to walk, or whether to go in a building or not go in a building. All the choices are yours, the consciousness.
But where's my free will as the elf?
Okay, the elf it doesn't exist. The elf is just ones and zeros. The elf is not conscious. You're its consciousness. You have free will as consciousness to make choices for the elf. So
even though there's a greater part of me controlling.
No, the other part's not controlling. It partitions off a part of itself. That part logs on and plays the game.
In a cut down version of itself.
Yeah, it takes just a piece. That piece then is playing the game. Okay, now what it does, the IUOC, Individuated Unit of Consciousness, it's the collector of these experiences. So you play this elf, and just like any other game, your elf eventually dies, and the game's over. Well, there's a purpose for this game. The purpose is that the consciousness is also evolving. Consciousness is an evolving information system. It evolves through its experience, through the quality of its choices. So when an avatar dies, then that I call it the free will awareness unit. That's the chunk that you partition off that plays the elf. That free will awareness unit now returns back, the partition's taken down, it returns back to the IOC, and then another free will awareness unit plays another avatar. So this experience is collected because it takes a lot of experience to do what the purpose is here, which is to evolve the quality of your consciousness.
So when it returns back to the some people call it home, heaven, however you want to personify it. I like your terms as well that you're using. When it returns back, where it came from, why couldn't it grow itself in that arena? Why would it need this?
Okay, we're going to now get into what's the purpose. Why have a virtual reality? What's the point of the virtual reality? Is it just entertainment, for consciousness? No, it's got a purpose. Okay, consciousness is an information system, and it's an aware information system. Okay, it's conscious. Okay, now information systems evolve by creating more and better information. That's how they evolve. If they lose information, they de-evolve. So think of information as order, structure. That's a measure of information. If you have a system and all the bits in the system are random, there's no information. Okay, you take bits and you order them, that creates information. Simple example, up, down, up, what's next? Down, because there was a pattern. The pattern has information, and I can predict after an up there's going to be a down because the pattern carries the information, you see. So when you have order, that creates information. Patterns are order. This measurement of order is called entropy. When you have a lot of disorder, you have high entropy. It's really, entropy is a measure of disorder. When you have low entropy, then you have a lot of order. So an information system evolves by lowering its entropy, creating new, better, more useful information. That's what they do. Now, how do you do that? Well, this larger conscious system started just, say, as a big monolithic thing. It was just this one thing. Well, the way that it could make new information was limited. You need novelty to create information. You need new patterns, new kinds of changes, new ways that you can relate to things, new ways that you can arrange things for a new order. So novelty and the potentiality has to grow. Well, the way that you solve that puzzle, when you get to, you kind of level out, plateau, and you can't evolve much anymore, you create a more complex system. Right? More complexity gives you lower entropy, more order within the complexity. And the way the system did that is that the most novelty that it could get would be to take a piece of itself, separate it from itself, and we're talking about maybe another partition, right? This is an information system, and give that partition free will as well. Now you have two free wills interacting with each other, and who knows what might come of that, you see. The number of possibilities goes up tremendously because both have free will, both could interact or do things, and each has to react to the other, which reacts to that, and where that goes is hard to tell. Well, now you can create tens of thousands or millions of these units and let them all interact with each other, and the potential possibilities of what that could all lead to are enormous now. So now that was the step of evolution. This is a virtual reality, and it follows. This virtual reality is a fractal reality, and it follows the same process. That's just what our biology did, right? You had single cells, they made multiple cells, then those cells cooperated and worked together and they made jellyfish. And then those things cooperated and worked together and you got fish and you got reptiles, you got mammals, and you get us. So it just keeps getting lower and lower entropy, more complexity. Here we are with so many trillions of cells and they're all in this dance together that has to work perfectly with each other to produce this avatar. You see, now that's the nature of a virtual reality, is that it has rules. Rules create choices, and choices can be high entropy or low entropy. So to answer your question, if you're just consciousness, what do you need the virtual reality for? Your consciousness, and the way you're going to evolve is by making something more of you and all the other pieces of consciousness out there. Well, you now have a social system, right? An interactive, a bunch of things that are aware, conscious, and they're interacting with each other, a social system. As it turns out, and it's a little bit of a logic chain to get there, but as it turns out, the optimum, low entropy optimum for a social system is when all the components of that social system, all the individuated units, are cooperative, work together, care about the whole, care about each other. That then can optimize what they can do as a group. And the most suboptimal arrangement is if everybody's out for themselves, it's only about me, what can I get, how much of the resources can I grab, and how can I hold on to them? Oh, somebody else has resources, I'd like those, I'll just take them away from them. So that is a very divisive, it doesn't optimize. That's the suboptimal thing. So one of them I call the path of love, caring. The other one's the path of fear. Those two being opposite. So that's just the nature. That's the logic of a social system. Any social system, any place with conscious beings works that way.
So do you think where we come from, that which we truly are, we only know love in its most, love is the only answer in a sense. Love is what we are, right?
Yes.
But we get to come here to play all the opposites of what love maybe is not.
No, it's not that way actually. But yes, we have that.
Doesn't it?
It's not that love is all the way we are. We have the potential to become love. Okay, we are these individuated units of consciousness. We're created. Now, we interact. And as we interact, we make choices. If we make good quality choices, then these are caring choices. These are cooperative choices. But we have free will. We can make poor choices. We can make the gimme, I want it all choice as well. So we get to make choices. But in the big, it's like a big chat room now. You have all these consciousnesses, and what they do is just communicate with each other. They pass information back and forth because they're in an information system. And it's like a huge chat room with no rules. They have to make up their own rules, right? Well, there's not much traction there. It's hard to grow up. It's hard to learn. It's hard to even understand that caring is important because you're just in a big chat room. You interact with some other consciousness. Are they telling the truth? Are they making it up? Are they pulling your leg? You have no way of knowing. So there's very little traction. So how do you solve that problem? That means that the evolution of consciousness is very, very slow because just a big chat room doesn't self-organize very quickly. It's chaotic, and it tends to stay chaotic. But if you had a reality frame where there were consequences to all your choices, you make a choice. If it's a bad choice, you get a slap. If it's a good choice, you get a reward. then you'd learn a lot more quickly. So consciousness realized it needed a rule set. You see, a game is created by rules. If I say, okay, let's play a game, start, nothing happens, right? You say, what's the rules? The rules create the game. The rules create choices. And so the virtual reality had to be created so that consciousness could interact with each other within a more tight rule set that provided consequences.
But to create something like this, of the creation you're talking about, that blows my mind. Just how
well, it's not as hard as it looks.
It's beyond our technology to do something like that now.
Well, not exactly. Yes and no. The way it was done, it wasn't programmed. It wasn't created as a whole thing. It was done in the same fractal process that is evolution. You start with a few initial conditions and a rule set, and then you hit the run button and you let it evolve. Now, what would those initial conditions be? Well, for this virtual reality, they would be a small ball of plasma, very high temperature, very high pressure, and a rule set would be what we call physics and chemistry and biology and all that stuff, and that's called the big digital bang. When you hit the run button, you let the rule set start dealing with what the rules are with that initial conditions. It expands. You find, you get a universe, you get suns, you get planets, you get an Earth, you get cells, you get us. So all that just evolves in a computer. It's just a simulation, and it evolves however it evolves.
Like the films The Matrix, there could be some truth in that. When you look at the Matrix films.
Yeah, there were some things in the Matrix that were right on, and there were some things that it doesn't work that way.
Of course.
But yes, so you have this simulation, and some of our computer science departments in major universities have simulations like this. Now, not like this in the extent that this one has evolved, but in the sense that they have put together initial conditions and rule sets, push the run button, and they've got systems that now have been evolving for years, and they are evolving. They are, depending on the rule set has things that work and things that don't work against criteria.
The simulated become the simulators, in a sense. What created us, we create something ourselves maybe one day in the far off future.
We can. Virtual realities can be nested. Yes, one virtual reality, you can have another virtual reality created inside a virtual reality. So they can be nested, but it's not a very practical
How do we know we're not
thing.
nested?
Well, we don't. Other than the fact that if you look at the structure of it, it's just not likely. It's not impossible, but it's not
But it's very
likely.
elusive, isn't it? You've got to want to look for this stuff. You've got to want to delve into these areas. It makes you feel stupid for looking into them on a bigger scale. It hides itself so sophisticatedly sometimes, yeah. Mm-hmm. It takes tragedy sometimes to look into these ideas, yeah. It's not,
Yeah, I was driven to look into these ideas because I'm a scientist and I want to know how it works. That was kind of my motivation. And I had all these experiences that were real, that I could test, and I wanted to know how they work.
Why does it make itself so elusive, do you think?
Oh, it's not trying to make itself elusive, but a good virtual reality is one where you don't know that it's a virtual reality. If you're playing a good virtual reality, it's one that's very realistic to you, one that you don't say, oh, this is a virtual reality. If you really want those choices to mean something, then it's not a game, it's your life, you see.
Yeah.
It's not a game, it's your life. So
it is. There is lots of truth in what you say. I always say to myself, I just remember being aware. Where the hell was I before? Mm-hmm. Where was I before? We've all gone through that. I was just aware. When was you aware? Well, I think I was aware at age 3 or 10.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
But see, that's because you're consciousness. You're not a body. You're consciousness. You are an individuated unit of consciousness, and you have part of yourself, a free will awareness unit, out, in this game. But as consciousness, as this free will awareness unit that's logged on to this avatar, this computed avatar, you still are consciousness. You can still communicate and connect and explore all of consciousness. Because you're consciousness, consciousness is your home. Consciousness is your playground.
But we still couldn't really, to sum up with human words, what the real consciousness really is, that surely is a struggle to say, I've defined it, this is what it is. This is what consciousness is. Isn't that a lifetime's work and beyond when you cross over?
When you cross over.
Or when you go back?
No, when you go back, you just are your individuated unit of consciousness again. You're aware, and you're in another virtual reality. Any reality that you can experience in, any reality that's experiential, is a virtual reality. Okay? Experience requires a rule set. Again, there's no game, there's no experience. If there are no rules, then there's nothing to create context. Context creates experience. So all the realities are virtual. So when you go out of body, you're in a different virtual reality. When you die, you end up in a different virtual reality.
So when we cross over, when we die, there's many talk, when people have had near-death experience, they talk about the life review, they talk about meeting relatives, they talk about a procedure, or when they've had hypnosis where they've gone in between life stages, where they're choosing the next life and doing all this and that. How does that fit into?
Well, that is basically the way it works, except the difference is that when you read, was it Michael Newton?
Oh, yes.
Who wrote a book with a lot of regressed people using hypnosis.
Many lives, many masters.
Yeah. But you also have the NDEs, near-death experiences, and so on. When you get these reports, of what these people see and hear and feel and what I did last time after I died and so on, you get these. It's very much like talking to a 5-year-old that's just been to Disneyland. And you ask the 5-year-old, well, what was it like in Disneyland? And your 5-year-old said, oh, I met Mickey Mouse, and he was big. And you say, was that the real Mickey Mouse? Oh, yeah, that was the real Mickey Mouse. I saw him and talked to him, you see. You get that kind of a view because the 5-year-old doesn't really have the bigger picture of Disneyland. They see it just the way that they can interpret it. They interpret it according to what they understand. Well, when Michael Newton interviews, 1,000 people or 10,000 people under hypnosis about, their afterlife experience or whatever, you're getting like a bunch of 5-year-olds explaining Disneyland. So fundamentally, the things they're saying are right. That 5-year-old did see Mickey Mouse. He's not lying. He really did see Mickey Mouse, but it's not really, Mickey Mouse. It's a guy in a Mickey Mouse suit. So they don't see that part. They don't see the guy in the Mickey Mouse suit. So yes, basically it does work like that. There are life reviews. That's part of the process after you've been around enough times to care, really. You want to learn as much as you can from the experiences you just had so that your next experience can be set up to work on, say, weak points rather than just to wallow in strong points. So the life review is to help you understand where your problems were. What are your weak points? And if you get to that review and it's like, well, what do you want to do next? See, everybody has free will. You don't have to do anything next. You can say, I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to sit here. That's fine. You have free will. But eventually you want to evolve. You want to continue. And the life review is just part of that process in this virtual reality I call the transition reality.
So that 5-year-old version of what a person perceives, because it may be to some people when they've gone under hypnosis, it does seem a bit foggy. It's more of a download than actually a knowing of being present in that moment there. Because,
they're getting information.
You've not disconnected from your body. You're still in your body having this kind of illusionary experience of what it potentially might be. And maybe that bigger part of you doesn't want to give you the bigger picture because we'll wait for that until you really do cross over.
Well, you can't tell the 5-year-old, hey, that was a guy in a Mickey Mouse suit.
Why do you compare that to a person under hypnosis to a 5-year-old?
Because most of the people who are going through this process do not have the bigger picture. So I just compare it to a 5-year-old because you end up with people with a small picture and they don't really know what's going on in the bigger picture, but they see the stuff they see.
But they've been
and
there
that's
before.
what they report. Yes.
And they've seen the bigger picture.
No. What they see is what's in this virtual reality and what's presented to them.
You
That's
think
not the bigger picture. What they see is Mickey Mouse and the dwarves and all the marvelous things. They don't see what's behind it.
Why not, do you think?
Well, because they are transitioning, right? They are an individual unit of consciousness. They are trying to grow up, evolve the quality of their consciousness. And they have done that to a certain degree. Now they die and they come with beliefs, they come with fears, they come with anxiety and all kinds of things.
After having a human experience.
Yeah, after having the human experience, right? Because that's all they know.
Yep.
That's been the totality of their experience. That's all they know. Now they're reintegrating with their individuated unit of consciousness, but that's all they know for that. So they have to. The main thing in this reality, where it's the transition reality, is to get people to just relax, let go, kind of let it flow. So first of all, their remembrance of the reality that they just left starts to fade like a dream, just like our dreams fade. It's perfectly clear, the first 10 seconds, less clear a minute later, less clear an hour later, and the next day, What was that dream? I can't really remember it, you see. That's the way your past life is. It fades like a dream. But meanwhile, in the beginning, you've got all this angst and what's going on and where am I? I'm no longer in Kansas, and you have all this going on. So it's a meet and greet, and there's your Uncle Fred and Aunt Harriet and stuff. It's not really your Uncle Fred and Aunt Harriet, but people report that because that's what it seemed like. It's part of the process of making people feel comfortable, and it's okay.
It's an aspect of their soul you're interacting with, maybe, or it's some. Who knows what it is, right? But
all the information you get. Remember, these are all virtual realities. It's all data stream. So everything
when you cross over, you're going to another virtual reality. This is
right, and you get a different data stream.
But then, where's the real reality?
Consciousness is the only thing that's fundamental.
Well, where do you get to that finite reality where this is the actual true reality of everything?
Consciousness is the only thing that's fundamental, and outside of a virtual reality, there is no experience.
But how do we don't even know then if we're ever going to get to that point to reconnect to ourselves to that.
We are already. We are pieces of consciousness. We're a part of that system.
We're trying to find our way back to them.
No, it's not that we find, we can, that's a metaphor that you're finding your way back. What you're trying to do is grow up. You're trying to lower the entropy of your consciousness. You're trying to evolve your quality. That's what you're about. You are a piece of consciousness, and you have to evolve. So you're not love already.
Yeah.
You need to grow up to that. You have the potential to be that. You have the potential to be anything that consciousness is.
In this reality, yes. Would you say?
No, well,
would you say that in this reality you could you can create your reality and you can have the reality that you want?
In this reality, there are ways you can't have the reality you want because it's a multiplayer game, but you can influence. There's much of this reality that you do create. I can list maybe 4 things that you create your own reality. One, a rather obvious way you create your own reality is the way you behave, the way you act, the way you interpret the data that you get will change the way other people interact with you. So let's say if you're nasty and mean and a user of people won't like you. They'll stay away from you. So now you're creating a reality that doesn't like you, right? That's one way. You create part of your own reality just through your own interactions with people, and they interact with you.
Okay.
Another way you create your own reality is through your interpretation. You get a data stream, okay? Right now, you get a data stream, and that data stream has the data in it that you interpret as this. Just like when you're playing your elf in your computer game, you get a data stream. That data stream defines your elf and what it's doing and the rule sets for which it has to operate in. And that becomes your reality. The data stream defines the nature of the virtual reality. So all players playing an avatar are getting a data stream, and they interpret that data stream. So you're playing World of Warcraft, you get a data stream That data stream lights pixels on your screen. All it is 3 million dots. They have location, they have intensity, they have color. That's it. 3 million dots, each with 3 dimensions to it. And you look at all those dots and you say, oh, that's my elf, and he's walking across a log over a stream and just doing this. And you interpret all of it, down to the blades of grass and leaves on a tree. You interpret the data as the reality. Well, that's the way we are. We're in a virtual reality. Your consciousness is getting the data stream, and you interpret it as this. It's a multiplayer game, so you can't have everything your way because you're interacting with other players.
Well, there is that thing where I've come across people where they say, if you just hold the thought in your head and just hold it tight.
Yes, that's another way that you can change. You do your reality.
You can modify the data stream.
And what that does is that you have the ability to modify the probability of what happens next. This virtual reality is not a deterministic virtual reality. It's a probabilistic virtual reality. It's got determinism at the very root, at the base in the rule set. But what we're interacting with, it's very probabilistic. You can change that probability with your intent. So if you are ill, you can change the probability of whether you get more ill or less ill or get better or get well with your intent. And you can do that for yourself or somebody else. That's called, mental healing. If you use your mind and you're headed into the center of town where you work and there's very hard to find a parking space, you can have your intent on somebody pulling out just as you get there so that you get that parking space.
Where is that feedback then to the virtual reality? Something must be feeding back.
Your intent modifies future probability. So you are part of the process of creating the virtual reality. So what happens is if I have intent that I want that parking space when I'm there, that modifies the probability that that'll happen. So maybe there's somebody else in that same office complex and they're getting ready to go. And they have to check some things first, and maybe they tarry a little bit or they have a conversation. Things happen to where they just get in their car and pull out just as you pull up. And that can all be, those probabilities change in order to produce your intention. You see, now it's not just a matter of making a wish. There's weak intentions and there's strong intentions. So you have making a wish is a weak intention. It's intellectual. A strong intention comes out of what I call the being level. And it's a strong intention if you don't have a lot of noise, if your signal to noise is high. Like if you meditate, you let go of all the noise, you have an intention, the intent's from the being level. Now that's a powerful intent that will change probability. But you don't necessarily get whatever you want. All you can do is modify probability. So if the probabilities were 10,000 to 1 that this is going to happen, and you work real hard because you want it to happen, you may make it all the way down to 1,000 to 1. Wow, you changed the probability, by a whole order of magnitude. You're really powerful, but it's still not likely to happen, you see. But if you had something where the probability was, 40, 60 or something.
But who's in charge of that probability though?
It's just it's built into the server that serves the game. It's just part of the way the server works.
Someone's decided that for you, or something's decided.
Well, the consciousness system is the fundamental thing. Part of that consciousness system is the server. It's organized itself into a computer, into the server that serves the virtual reality.
Who knows if that server's being fair to you? You may say, well, is that...
Well, it's just, how does the game work? You have a server, you log on, you're a player, it makes things. How does that all get connected? Well, it gets connected when you log on.
But
right?
One of the things about life lessons, what about there's some things in this life that are predetermined that you're going to meet that person because...
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you can come here with a plan.
Well, you can come here
and
with
your
a plan.
life is scripted to a plan.
Yeah.
Sometimes not.
Okay.
There's most people not. Those people, particularly in the beginning, when you're in this process in the beginning, it's jump in, jump out. You just need experience. Until you have experience, you really don't have much to work with. But the more experience you have, the more of these lifetimes and experiences, the more you grow up, then you can start planning what's happening next. And well, I'm really weak in this area, so I want to get in a situation where I'm going to be challenged in that area because I need that.
Like who becomes president, or why is Oprah Winfrey doing what she's doing? You know, people of massive influence, or the Facebook guy and all this. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the people who are making big changes in the world, it just seems that they've come here for a reason.
Sometimes.
I'm not saying that's true, but
sometimes it just works out that way.
Okay.
You see, it's not always. Everything is not scripted. Everything is not done for a particular purpose. Everything does serve a purpose.
So when we say those words to ourselves, which may be something like this, like, you know, I'd like to have this, but I'm not attached to the outcome.
What that does is it takes it out of your intellect ego, being not attached, puts it down to the being level, and makes it a more powerful intent, you see. So we can modify future probability. Whenever there's something that could go multiple ways, whenever there's multiple solutions to something that could happen, the way those multiple solutions are picked is that here's all the possibilities. The possibilities all have certain probabilities, and you get to pick. You get a random draw among that distribution of probabilities.
So there was on point 3 of, I believe, of creating your reality. There was 4 points altogether. Mm-hmm. Point 3 was?
Okay, we had the fact that it's the way you interact with people. It's the way you interpret the data. Data comes to you and you interpret it. That's your perspective. So, you know, that makes a huge difference in your reality. There's a difference between a male perspective and a female perspective. There's a difference in the perspective of somebody who's widely traveled and somebody that's never been more than 20 miles from where they were born. You know, you have different perspectives, and that makes you interpret the data you get differently. So you receive the data, but you have to interpret that data based on your own experience base, your own fear, your own ego, your own love. All that stuff is how you interpret it. So your reality is really greatly modified just by how you interpret the data. And then the next one was that you get to modify the data with your intent. And people who are very positive and up, and, you know, they generally have lives that are very positive and up, and people that are sad sacks, always complaining and whining and woe is me, and, you know, everything happens to me, and they wallow in that self-pity. Everything crappy happens to them because they create that reality. If you're very fearful of something, you'll create it.
Okay, now, how do I start with this? What about people's ideas on the parallel universes as well?
Well, parallel universes is a idea that is possible, but highly unlikely. So it is a way, you see, science has kind of painted itself in a corner. It's painted itself in a corner, and it knows that, because of quantum mechanics particularly, it knows that our reality is really not fundamentally matter and energy, that it's information. They kind of know that, okay? And they kind of know that it's not a material world, it's not a deterministic world, it's probabilistic. They know that. But they're trapped by that. Then how does something like consciousness work? Well, then there's no answer. They call that the hard problem. They can't understand that. How does synchronicity work? How can a lot of things that we know? How does the placebo effect work? And because they can't explain those things, they need a way to do that. And one way to do that is that every choice you make creates another universe. There's a universe where you didn't make that choice and one where you did. The reason that, it's possible. It's like theoretically that solves the problem. Now all these things can happen because you can move through these various parallel universes, you see, and strange things can happen. Suddenly you have a non-local kind of space, which is the way quantum mechanics said it is. So it's an explanation. It's just not a good explanation, because if I do this instead of this, another whole universe, you see, has to be created. Every time an electron flips from spin up to spin down, another whole universe has to be created. So you can imagine for every particle, and every way a particle bounces, it could have bounced some other way. You see, and every time any of us do anything trivial, every second of your life, there will be thousands of new universes. And same with you see, it just gets to be ridiculous. It's not a usable way. It takes way too many resources. It doesn't make any sense. And as a virtual reality, the computation would be, obviously immense. Whereas if you have a probabilistic reality, see, that way you can save determinism, because you can say everything could possibly happen does happen. So you've saved determinism, which you need to save materialism. But with a probabilistic reality, everything that could possibly happen has a probability of happening. It's a potentiality, not something real. Now that gives you a computer problem that's much, much easier.
What about people's research into the Groundhog Day effect, where maybe if it's not parallel universes, what if it's the idea that, what if we get to relive this same life again?
Well, that absolutely does happen. We're here to grow up. We're here to learn, to make choices toward the side of love and caring and cooperation and that sort of thing. And if we don't get it right, we get to do it again. And if we don't get it right again, we get to do it again. So it's just like the Groundhog's Day. Until he got it right, he got to do it again. That's the way it is, because you're here to learn and take your time. This is not a time test.
But what about if you get to relive this same timeline? Forget future and past lives. What about if we get to do this again, and we're now doing it in a different way because we just, there were things to learn even in this time frame.
Yeah. We don't get the same experience again. We get another experience that challenges us in similar ways. The same experience can't repeat. Time keeps moving on. Time does indeed flow in one direction. So the past is the past, and you don't relive the past. When you visit a past data, when you visit the past and you can go back in a past life, and all of that is information based. It's all data in a database. That's not people with free will making choices. That's somebody with free will exploring a database. A very large and expansive database that has all the possibilities in it. So it's true that, let's say you don't learn your lesson and you're a user of people and you're not nice and you have no need to cooperate or care or anything else, well, you get to try again, but not in the exact same situation. You get another situation, another lifetime, another perspective, another way of looking at it. Now, the system may try to help you, just like he helped the guy in Groundhog's Day. He may try to help you in the sense that if you're having trouble, say, with anger management, they may put you in a place where you receive the brunt of somebody that has anger management, so you get to learn a little bit what that's like from the other side. Or they may put you in a place where where your anger management is just going to get you in so much trouble that you finally maybe learn something. You see, so there's ways of helping you learn.
So you wouldn't say, so if I said to you, right, I'm going to come back to 1978 again when when I come back here, and I want to relive from 1978 to all the years that I'm would have done in this life, but doing things differently. Would you say that's just ridiculous?
Yeah, it's impossible. It doesn't work that way. You can't ever go back. History's history. You can't go back to 1970 and redo it, but you can be re-challenged by all the same things that challenged you then will challenge you again, because until you learn it, you'll just run into those challenges. So those things just will happen. Right. But the fact that you see it from a different perspective now. Last time you were Joe Schmo, the big, 6'10" lumberjack, weighed 400 pounds, and now you're a little Chinese girl. You're gonna get all the same challenges, but from a totally different perspective. So you're not likely to get stuck in a rut. See, that was part of the Groundhog Day guy. He got kind of stuck in a rut, and it took him a long time to work his way out of that rut. But when you see things from a new perspective, It's the same old choice, the choice to be nice or the choice to not, but it's in a totally different perspective.
What's your views on channeling?
Channeling. Well, channeling is a real thing. You know, I guess we'll do the very basic things first. You know, is that all fake and bogus? Are they making it all up? No, it is not. Most channelers, you know, they can channel all sorts of things. Some channelers channel dead people. If you're channeling dead people, you're getting data from the past database. You're not really channeling that dead person. Now, they will immediately object to that and say, well, of course I am. You know, I talk to them, they know all the things. The database basically represents that person. Everything that person saw, thought, did, mused, every emotion, feeling, the database is that person. And it represents not only that person, but it represents that person in a probability space. So you can go into that space and you can say, all right, I want to interact with, you know, Uncle Fred, but I want to only interact with the fourth most probable thing that Uncle Fred would do rather than the first. And you get a different slice. So you have depth in probability. And you can discuss current events with Uncle Fred. And you will get what Uncle Fred probably would have said about that current event based on all of Uncle Fred's history. So it's a database. So it is Uncle Fred minus the free will, you see. But other than that, there's no difference between that Uncle Fred in the database and that Uncle Fred that was your Uncle Fred when you knew him. They're identical, except the one when you knew him was making choices and the other one does not. Now he'll seem to make choices because he'll tell you things, he'll maybe argue with you. But that's the database. Now, most of the time, that's done for a reason, to help somebody that's still here struggling with an issue. That's the point of it. The system helps support that by providing a data stream to the medium so that they can help somebody who needs closure or some other sort of thing. They need to talk to their dead child or something else that's important for them so they can go on with their growth. So that's just part of the way the system works. So mediums will get upset when I say it's not the real one, but in a sense it is the real one. There's really no difference. It is the real one, but the actual individuated unit of consciousness has gone on. You can't just have Uncle Fred sitting on a cloud playing his harp waiting for somebody to ask him a question. That doesn't compute. That doesn't make sense. He's gone on. He's in another experience. Like now he's that Chinese girl. You know, he's doing something else. He's progressing. We don't just stop growing and wait for somebody to call us up, you know, a medium to ring us up on the phone, you know, so they can talk to us. That's available to help people. That's even available just to help people learn how to do it. And you may talk to just another IUOC. You may talk to the larger consciousness system. There's 3 things out there that will send you data in a data stream. One of them is the larger consciousness system. And it may be sending you data posing as Uncle Fred because that's what this person needs to help them go on and, you know, learn here. Or it may be another IUOC. I can put thoughts to you and you will get those thoughts, whether you get them in your intellect or not, but you will get them just the same. And it could be another IUC, could be one that has a body here, an avatar, it could be one that's never been here. You can interact with another avatar, and the third source of data is yourself. You can create data because you are consciousness. Anything consciousness can create data. And that's not just people, you know. That's dogs and cats and horses and skunks and bumblebees and everything else that's conscious, makes choices, and can create information. So you never get a tag on the information you get. You get information, but it doesn't say, this is another IUOC, this is the larger conscious system, or this is you. You have to interpret that.
So when a channeler says to me, I'm channeling the Palladians from another dimension, from, you know, if you went to that space coordinates that I'm telling you that we're from, you would see nothing there. But from another dimensional aspect, we are there?
Well, when a person tells you that they're channeling the Pleiadians from so-and-so, what's probably happening is that they have set up this relationship, see, with these Pleiadians. And they have identified themselves that way and told the medium, oh, we're Pleiadians and we come from this and that. And they can give them history and all sorts of other things. The system will give you information that helps you, function or helps you pass it on to other people. It's usually for a reason. It's not just for your entertainment. There's some purpose to it downstream.
Spiritually evolve you.
Yeah, there's some purpose to it. And the system will take whatever guise that suits you, that works. Okay, you're very religious, you may be talking to Jesus or the Mother Mary or an angel. If you're not, you may be talking to the Pleiadians. If you're, say, from the East, you may be talking to your ancestors.
Or Darryl Anker's future self.
Yes, or whatever. Anything you can imagine. The system will pick a way to communicate to you that suits you and the way you interpret things. So a person may get some communication. They have to interpret it. All right, they interpret, they know, who is this? What is this sort of thing? And then they may ask some questions, they'll get some things back, and eventually it'll work itself into a thing. It may be Pleiadians, or it may be your great ancestor, or maybe Jesus, but these are all metaphors that the channel makes to explain the source of their data. And it's very much because of the channeler, their background, their understanding, their knowledge, their ignorance, their fear, their love. It's all the stuff that makes that channeler a unique being. That unique being interprets this data. And in an interaction with the source of the data, it'll build up a story about the data. The story about the data is really not important at all and should be taken with a grain of salt. Mostly that doesn't happen because mostly the mediums get very attached to their thing and whatever it is.
Just like they did with Jesus.
Yeah, they're very
Muhammad,
connected.
Yeah.
They're very connected to that. And those Pleiadians are the Pleiadians, and they do this, and they have little pointy heads, and they do, and they get all this, and they'll get a picture of what they look like. Anything they ask for, the system will send them something back to support that. But that's really not what it's about. You see, it's not about Pleiadians. That's just a metaphor for them to explain what they get. What it's about is the usefulness of the information that they're getting to themselves and others. So one person's Pleiadians is somebody else's great-great-great-grandfather and somebody else's Mary and
Gaia.
Whatever. Yeah. So it's whatever you want to be, or it's your higher self, or it's whatever.
Yeah.
That's an interpretation that the medium brings to it.
So when a medium gives a reading, we've only got a few more questions, I swear. Right? When a medium
gives all right, we're having fun.
we are. When a medium gives a reading, you're saying you're never actually speaking to that person, the consciousness of that person as it was in the real time as I'm speaking to you now. It's a database, right? Mm-hmm. It kind of feels a bit sad because you're like, well, when I cross over, am I ever actually going to meet that person I love so much again, the actual real person that was having that experience with me?
Probably not. Because what'll happen is when you cross over, you'll begin to forget that like a dream. That'll all start to dissipate. And very shortly, it won't be there anymore. Just like your dreams. So you won't have this, it's not like when you cross over, you're going to be exactly who you are right now. You're not going to be that. You're going to reintegrate with that individuated unit of consciousness. This past life's going to fade, and pretty soon, you'll relax, you'll let go, you'll figure it out, you'll get bored, you'll want to go on, you'll understand some about what you're doing, and then you'll go through the process and off you go again to something else. You're there to have experience, you see. So that's very difficult for some people because they're lovers, their children, their parents, and they're gonna be there forever and ever more. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't make sense. It's another one of those things that doesn't process. Let's say that was the case, and you're your children and you and your favorite golden retriever were all going to be there forever, right? If that worked out, and let's say you've had 10,000 incarnations, so that would give you roughly 10,000 or maybe 15,000 wives, maybe 20,000, 30,000 children, 15,000, 10,000 parents. You see what I mean? Whole bunch of thousands of your favorite golden retrievers. So what are you going to do now if you had 50,000 dear loved ones that were just as close to you as possible? How can you get to deal with that? It doesn't work. It's not really like that. You need to move on, but you have all that data to go back and visit and review and
that's
connect
funny.
with.
In the channeling experience with other channelers, they've kept saying to me, so many subjects you could talk about, but you could write books on just the life review process, just that one tiny aspect.
Sure.
Books upon books upon books. They say to me in channeled mode, you've barely touched the truth of the information. You've got these big names walking around that I'm saying, personifying this one, that done this great work, and you think that's the end of the work. No, it's not. No.
For mostly, they're 5-year-olds that are explaining Disneyland to you.
So do you think there's an evolution to the big toe work? My big toe work?
Oh, of course. If there's no further evolution to it, it's dead. There's a corpse. Now, any understanding has to evolve. It has to continue to grow. And as new information comes up, if it doesn't fit, then this has to be either expanded so it does fit in a logical way, or it needs to be thrown out and done some different way. So yes, any concept needs to be alive.
You look at the people out there totally addicted to conspiracies, ufology, secret space programs, the Illuminati. To me, well, this answers all that in a sense.
Yeah. Well, they're wrapped up in their own fear. You see, that's most of the conspiracy stuff is just fear. So remember I said that you interpret the data? Well, if you're very fearful, you interpret the data as scary stuff. Oh no, lions, tigers, and bears. That's how you interpret the data. And the more you interpret it, the scarier it gets. And that makes you even more fearful. So people go down this conspiracy theory hole, and it just builds more and more fear.
So with ufology, in a sense, I think it's fascinating, right? Mm-hmm. But where does that fit into the My Big Toe? Very briefly.
Well, there's very, very briefly. It's impossible to do anything very, very briefly.
Oh, I know.
Because otherwise we'll be having a 5-year-old's view of Disneyland, you see. Very briefly, you miss the stuff that's really important. So anyhow, most of that is interpretation. For instance, we look at crop circles. Okay, you look at crop circles and people say, well, aren't they amazing? Look how big they are, look how detailed they are. Did a bunch of farmers do that at night with no lights and didn't make a sound? Not likely. So then you say, well, then where did it come from? Well, then if it didn't come from us, it must be aliens. Well, that's not necessarily the case, but we tend to go there because that's an easy answer, and all our movies and entertainment kind of lead us in that way. Basically, things like that, they're artifacts of consciousness. The larger consciousness system has always and is still doing things to wake us up, putting us in situations where there is no pat answer, where there is no material cause. And by doing that, they just crack our mind open a little bit, saying, oh, like me getting the
Yes.
the debugging.
But
right?
then what about the jet that's following the craft? What about the jet in the sky that's chasing this unknown huge object? And it's
just data. Okay, if a guy's in a jet and he sees a craft, well, that craft he sees is data coming in his data stream. The consciousness can put a flying saucer in your data stream anytime it wants. Not a problem. It's just information.
So then if I was to go into the universe, would it be devoid of life, or would it be dependent on what the data stream wants to give me?
It would be what the system has done with it. And there's a pretty good chance, we could talk about Fermi paradox, which is about this. There's a pretty good chance that there isn't going to be anything else there, that it's just us.
Why would it just create this form, though?
Well, one would think, see, and I kind of fell in this trap a long time ago too, is that you say, well, that's a waste. There's one tiny little sun and tiny little planet in the middle of this vast universe, and this is the only game in town.
Yeah.
What a waste of resources. Not in a virtual reality. You see, in a virtual reality, you don't have to simulate anything except what you put in a data stream to a player. Okay? So all of that stuff out there is just data stream in somebody's, when he looks in a great big telescope and he says, oh, look at the nebula, that's 100,000 light years away. Well, that's data in his data stream. As soon as he looks away from that telescope, the system's not computing that. That doesn't exist. Just like, there's a brain in my head, right?
Well,
it's a virtual brain. You see, it doesn't have to compute that brain. It only computes what you see when you're looking at it. All good virtual realities are like that.
Well, if they did exist, could they say the same about us? If they did exist, could they say the same about us if they were looking upon us?
Well, the reason that yes, anybody can, everybody has their own perspective, right? But perspective doesn't create reality. Perspective only creates how you interpret the data. So the system has this big universe. And there's plenty of places, probably millions of places that life could be seated here. The question is, how many seats does the system need in this entropy reduction trainer we call our universe?
But then why make an infinitive universe?
Oh, the universe is only there when you look at it.
I see.
You see? It's not there.
Beyond these walls, right? Beyond that, I can see quite in the distance right now.
Yes, but that direction,
I can't
see anything. So there's nothing in that direction that is being put in your data stream, or my data stream, or anybody else's data stream.
So is it there right now?
Reality only exists in the mind of the player. You see, you keep wanting to make a physical reality because that's natural. That's what everybody wants to do.
Well, it's like the people in the background. When people are walking in the distance, I'm never going to go run up to them and say, hey, how are you doing? I don't know you, but I don't know they're even conscious. I just know that they're in the background.
But you're getting data in your data stream that you interpret as those people. It's an interactive game, so you could come up. You're not getting, we'll take this room next door. You're not getting that data, and neither is anybody else.
No.
The system is not computing it. It doesn't have to compute it. This reality is only the data stream that your consciousness gets. So as I walk in there, I get that data. Think about your elf, when the elf plays. Let's say that nobody is in the World of Warcraft game. Not a single player is logged on. What is the computer computing? Is it computing houses and monsters and caves? No. It's not computing anything. It only computes the data it sends to each player.
So the UFO things, they're little bits just to say, hey, wakey, wakey.
Yeah.
There's maybe something more. You can call it what you want, but it's more, isn't it, than what you ever perceived was possible.
Right, reality is bigger than you think.
But then why are we, when someone says about an abduction and all this, an abduction, again, that's another way to wake those people up. Maybe it's the only way in this lifetime that they would have a wakey.
It's also a way that they interpret things based on their own fear.
Isn't that interesting, right? I'll tell you this, that most UFO researchers who were very much nuts and bolts, guess where they've gone in the direction of their field of research? Consciousness. Mm-hmm. It all leads to consciousness.
Exactly. See, consciousness is at the root of the whole thing. So most of you could be standing in a group of people, and there could be 10 of you, and it could be 3 of you could say, oh, look at those lights in the sky. And the other 7 say, what lights? And the 3 of you can talk to each other and say, yeah, there were 5 of them, 3 of them were green, 1 were and you know each other.
Exactly how it happens.
So you say it has to be real because these 3 people all got the same data. What's the possibility they'd all just make something up that was the same? Almost zero. What happens? Those 3 people got that in their data stream. The others didn't.
So summing this all up, because we're going to come to the end now. This is the end now. Summing this all up, and we've barely touched the surface of your work.
Barely touched the surface.
Even
and
just
we skimmed across it so fast that there's so much of the underpinning and the derivation that isn't there that it sounds kind of fantastical.
It does, right? The most important message to end this off has to be then, if this is a truth that people will come to in their own time, or a truth that you're presenting here, then the only truth of all of this is that all that really matters is how much did you love today?
Yes, that's the point. That's what you're here for. You have logged on to this game because this is an entropy reduction trainer. Just like a flight trainer where you learn to fly an airplane. You come here because there are choices with consequences. So you can learn faster here than you can in a big chat room with almost no consequences. You make choices. Those choices are made by your free will. Those choices help you either evolve, if they're caring, loving, cooperative choices, or de-evolve, if they're fearful choices. You interpret the data that you get, and the whole reality exists only in the minds of the players. You see, the players create the reality. Now you take that idea and you move that into quantum mechanics, and now you have a perfectly logical explanation of how quantum mechanics works. Why do you need the observer? Because reality doesn't exist without the observer. You see, if there is no observer, there's no data stream. So in the world of Warcraft, if there's only one guy and he's over in the eastern quadrant, the game isn't producing stuff that's in the western quadrant for nobody to see. The only data that computer's computing is sent to that one guy. So that World of Warcraft world exists only in the minds of the players. But because it's a multiplayer game, those players can interact. They can do things with or to each other, you see. So in our sense, we're in a virtual reality. Our reality is a data stream coming to a consciousness. That consciousness is interpreting that data as this. So that room over there, if there is no consciousness that needs that data, why would the computer compute it? It doesn't have to. You see, it only computes for you and I, it only computes what we see. For the people out there walking down the street, it doesn't send them pictures of us sitting in here talking. It only sends them their data, you see. And their reality is based on the data they get. Our reality is based on the data that we get. Everybody walking around here is walking around in their own personal reality, but they're interactive because it's a multiplayer game. So that's how it works. So yes, you can have not only things in the sky that jets can chase, but one can crash and leave a big chunk of metal lying in the desert. And you can come out and pick the metal up and throw it in the back of your truck if you want. It's just data.
A reverse engineering.
It's just data. My son played, it was a Microsoft game where you were back in the Stone Age. And you had to work your way up from the Stone Age up, and whatever. You had to learn things. The name escapes me right now. Yeah. Age of Empire. No.
It could have been. It could have been.
Age of Empires?
Yep, could have been.
Could be. Anyway, this was a virtual reality, right? And you had to work yourself up, and it was an evolutionary game. My son found out a cheat code. And then there were competing groups. So there'd be 4 or 5 players. There'd be 4 or 5 competing groups, and maybe the computer would play a group. And they all had to... And eventually there'd be one winner that, ruled the world, right? Well, my son had a cheat code, and when he put in this cheat code, he materialized a Mercedes-Benz with a nuclear rocket launcher in the back seat. And he could target it. He had a little targeting thing on his Mercedes-Benz, and he could send a nuclear warhead to that other part of the map where that other place was, and everybody there would disappear. And all the map would just lay level and flat. So he could win the game, okay? It's just data, you see. So if he can materialize a Mercedes-Benz in that game, it's not that hard for the system to produce what looks like a spaceship flying around out where that jet is. It's just information. It's data. The system can produce whatever it wants to help us see a bigger picture, to understand that this idea that this is just a material reality and nothing else, to see that there's a spiritual component, that consciousness is real. It will give us all the slaps in the face that we can stand to wake us up to see a bigger picture. Why? Because that's on our path to growing up. As we see that bigger picture, we begin to understand it's about love, it's about caring. We're here to grow up. So the system does those kinds of things. Synchronicity. Why does synchronicity happen? Synchronicity happens because the system is doing a little nudging to give you something that you need just at the time you need it.
Or deja vu.
Yeah, whatever. You see, it's just information. Your reality is yours.
Tom, this has been such a fascinating conversation, and I've so enjoyed it as well. I will get you back on in the not too distant future, but thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'm sorry that we had to rush through and skim over the top, because I know there are going to be a lot of listeners out there, and they're going to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. What about, and the fact is, it does make sense if they understood it and they actually got the derivations and saw the logic of it. It's a perfectly logical process with no big assumptions. And what's neat about it is that it does better science.
And we'll link your website throughout this interview as well, and your books on the screen. And your website, just at the end of this, is?
My website is www.mbt, well, two of them, www.mybigtoe.com. That's my website. www.mbtevents.com, and that is where I'm going to be. That's Keith and Donna's website, and where I'm going to be, where I'm going to be talking, what's going on next, and kind of what's happening.
We'll link both on this throughout this interview as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.